Georgia was getting ready to pick the exotic fruits of the forest to enjoy herself in the sounds of the forest. After crossing the river, a loud cry of a baby made her leave her thoughts and immediately go to rescue him. Returning to the village with the child in her arms, everyone began to say that it had been a gift from the spirits of the forest to alleviate the deep sadness that tormented her. But no one really imagined the dark secret that surrounded the true origin of the newborn. That afternoon, a few hours after sunset, the woman took her canoe after finishing her work and crossed the great river alone. For after having been the victim of the most terrible calamity, she hardly spoke to anyone and did not miss the slightest thing or opportunity to get away from everyone. Always feeling oppressed and without a reason to live while her soul withered with bitterness and sadness, Georgia will become a cold and distant woman. That was why, at first, upon hearing that cry, she became inert, believing that it was a trick of her imagination. What made her even more shocked when she saw the baby floating in the river. Georgia was born near that forest, and from an early age, she learned from her parents to work the land and connect with nature to get the best out of it. Precisely, her family was one of the first to inhabit the small village where many years had to pass for the government to realize the potential of its plantations and build access roads that supplanted the dirt roads and boosted the local economy. Because they allowed access to businessmen and entities from other cities who, fascinated by the quality of their grains, even bought large quantities of these to take praise to their cities of origin. With that, many people constantly coming and going. Georgia's mother had the idea of creating a promising business that turned out to be even better than they could have imagined. On the other side of the river, thanks to the wonderful hands of her husband, who seemed to bless all the land they cultivated, an exotic fruit had grown, from which, using a secret technique learned by their ancestors, an exquisite jam was obtained that people would never find anywhere else at no other place. That's how they set up a simple stall, where they started to offer them in the center of the city. And according to the buyers, when they were testing them, they started to come back with bigger and bigger orders that allowed them to transform the small stand into a humble place, but very cozy. At that point, Georgia was already a young woman. But although all the women in the family had dedicated themselves to working in the new business, she refused to join them, as she preferred to dedicate herself to working the land and the arduous tasks of cultivation in the depths of the forest, because she loved even more than her father to connect with nature and give life to everything that sowed in it. Over time, the quality of its food and the beauty of its landscapes made the village attract even more attention of businessmen, who invested their money in various places, restaurants, and tourist attractions that further increased the income of farmers, as now even people from abroad frequented the place. Although her parents had insisted on sending her to study at a school close to the house of one of her aunts who lived in the city, Georgia always categorically refused, as she claimed that there they could not teach her about the land and planting, which was the only thing she had more passion for than her own nature taught her daily during every shift. However, despite not knowing how to read or write, the fruits of her orchards, together with the profits she had obtained from negotiating the large sales of grains and tubers produced by her father, allowed her to buy a modern tractor and new tools for sowing and plowing that was the envy of other farmers. They say that when people's lives are destined to intersect, the entire universe takes care of arranging every detail to make it happen. It was precisely in this way that everything conspired for Georgia to meet Luca, a handsome young man from abroad, who on the only day that she dared to stay in the jam shop, he stopped to see the popular place, and when he saw her, he was fascinated by her exotic beauty. That morning, her mother had woken up very unwell, so she begged the daughter to replace her at the store, as she had a lot of late orders to deliver. Young Luca, heir to a multi-million-dollar wedding of foreigners who was on a tour of the region, went out for a walk alone that day and stopped at the eye-catching shop to try the famous jams that people talked about so much in town. At that moment, Georgia was the only one who had arrived. and when she left to serve him, he was so delighted with her that he spent the rest of the day trying jams and buying them so that he could continue talking to her. A week later, Luca informed her that he had to return to his country, but promised that he would return very soon so that they could be together. Although saddened by his departure, Georgia looked forward to it, and as promised, a few months later, Luca returned to stay. The women of the city couldn't stop commenting on how lucky she was to find such a handsome and rich man. He used to lead a life of luxury, used part of his money to build a beautiful house in the middle of the prosperous orchards of the woman who will now become his wife, and showing that, despite never having been in need, he was a hard-working man. He also invested in new land to farm and partnered with his in-laws to expand the jam business and start exporting jams. 3 years later, the happy couple celebrated the joyous birth of their first daughter, whom they named Emilia. A beautiful girl who became the light in the eyes of the whole family and strengthened even more the love that united them. Georgia and Luca, who also fell in love with agricultural work, took the little girl everywhere and worked hard so that she lacked absolutely nothing. Every time she traveled to visit his country, the proud father brought her countless gifts and toys never seen before by the villagers, which many were jealous of, claiming that they became conceited and stopped talking to them. Despite their criticisms, they were not able to bring down their immense happiness, as their only purpose was to take care of and see their little girl smile. A year later, a heartbreaking tragedy strikes the family, making them feel that not even happiness can last forever. While Georgia was harvesting one of the crops in the orchards, Luca wanted to go canoeing with little Emilia down the river, not imagining that an unexpected storm would infuriate the waters, which would end up dragging the light canoe to the mouth of an imposing waterfall. For more than 3 days, Georgia, who still could not come to terms with what had happened, searched for her husband and daughter, with the help of relatives and other villagers along the river. Her heart was broken when some fishermen who were navigating the waters of the sea where it flows were notified that they had found 2 lifeless bodies floating in the water. Georgia, feeling that she had been robbed of her reasons for living, since then locked herself in her house and only went out to get lost among her plantations, where she tried to forget that painful reality that was killing her inside, isolating herself in the sounds of nature until the day when the cry of that mysterious baby took her out of her thoughts and made her submerge herself in the cold waters of the river to save her. After giving her a warm bath, changing into dry, clean clothes that she had saved from her daughters, and feeding her barley water, which was all she could manage, Georgia decided to take care of the girl while someone seemed to be looking for her. But weeks passed, and no one was looking for her. The news that had already spread throughout the city caused many to start claiming that the girl had been a gift sent from the spirits of the forest to calm the great sadness that afflicted Georgia. In this way, Georgia became the new mother of the baby, who she raised as her own and named her Emilia in honor of her late daughter. Her family members also accepted the girl as one of their own, and together they cared for her and made sure she never lacked for anything. In addition to passing on all her knowledge and taking her back to her days to learn about the land, Georgia made the decision to learn to drive so that she could use the car that her husband had left for her and be able to take Emilia to a school in a neighboring town, where she began to receive academic training. Almost a decade after finding a new reason to laugh, in the same place where everything was taken from her, mother and daughter were singing and laughing on their way to school, when a patrol crossed their path and forced the woman to get out of the vehicle. After accusing her of kidnapping the girl, the police handcuffed her and took her without allowing her to say a single word. At that time, her daughter was crying and screaming her mother's name without understanding anything. At the police station, they accused her of kidnapping the little girl, as she was the daughter of a very prestigious family, and the mother of the girl is very rich. When she gave birth to the girl and was married to a humble man, the father of the multi-millionaire woman refused the girl and took her and threw her into the river, and they accused Georgia of helping him in that. Georgia refused all accusations and only needed to see her daughter. But because the real mother is a rich woman, the police only believed her and kept Georgia prisoned. The villagers, the neighbors of Georgia, protested against the law enforcement for holding Georgia, and with the media pressure, Georgia managed to get out of that situation The rich woman took Amelia to live with her, but the girl never felt happy. She flew away from her mansion and returned back to Georgia. At that moment, the rich woman knew that she will never be able to get Amelia back or make her happy, so she agreed that Amelia lives with Georgia as before, but to never lose the contact with her, as by this way, Georgia got her happiness, her Amelia, back.